Chapter 2. Old Rusty and Mildewed. Now, I don't know if you've got it into your heads yet, but the Pott family wasn't a very conventional family. That is, they were all rather out of the ordinary. Even Mimsy must have been rather an adventurous sort of a mother, or she wouldn't have married an explorer and inventor like Commander Caractus Pott RN, retired, who had, as they say, no visible means of support, meaning he was someone who doesn't do regular work that brings in regular money, but depends on occasional windfalls from lucky explorations or inventions. So when it came to buying a car, they were all determined that it shouldn't be just any car, but something a bit different from everyone else's. Not one of those Black Beetle saloon cars that look much the same back and front, so that in the distance you don't know if they're coming or going, but something rather special, something rather adventurous. Well, they hunted all that afternoon and all the next day. They looked at brand new cars and they visited the second-hand showrooms, where smart salesmen offered Commander and Mrs. Pott gift vouchers and Jeremy and Jemima sweets just to try and tempt them to buy. But Commander Pott knew pretty well all there is to know about cars, having been an engineer officer in the Navy and being an inventor as well, and one look under the bonnet and one trial, listening carefully to the sound of the engine, was generally enough for him. Even if he didn't notice that the speedometer had been disconnected, or that the chassis was bent because of some crash whose scratches and dents the salesman had carefully painted over, you have to be very cautious buying anything second-hand. You never know how careful the last owner has been. And anyway, whatever the thing is, if it is in good order, why does the person want to get rid of it? And then, at the end of the second day, they came to a broken-down little garage run by a once famous racing driver. It was really only a big tin shed with a couple of grimy petrol pumps outside, and inside the concrete floor was slippery with oil, and everywhere there were bits and pieces of old cars that the garage man had been tinkering with, really, as far as one could see, just for the fun of it. But he was the sort of enthusiast Commander Pott always had a warm corner in his heart for. The two of them went on talking for a long time, while Mimsy and Jeremy and Jemima, who were pretty tired by then, grew more and more impatient. Suddenly, they were surprised to see Commander Pott follow the garage man around to the back of his shed. There was a long, low object hidden under a tarpaulin. The garage man looked Commander Pott and the family, each one carefully up and down, and then he went to one end of the tarpaulin and slowly rolled it back. Well, I can't tell you how disappointed Mimsy and the children were. From the way the garage man had behaved, they thought there must be some splendid treasure of a car under the tarpaulin. But what did they see? A wreck, that's all. Just the remains, rusty and broken and bent, of a very long, low four-seater, open motor car, without a hood and with the green paint peeling off in strips.
"Well, there she is," said the garage man sadly. "She once knew every racing track in Europe. In the old days, wasn't a famous driver in Britain who hadn't driven her at one time or another. She's still wearing England's racing green, as you can see. That was from early in the 30s. She's a 12-cylinder, 8-litre, supercharged Paragon Panther. They only made one of them, and then the firm went broke. This is the only one in the world. Doesn't look much, does she? I'm afraid she's due for the scrap heap. Can't afford to go on giving her living space. They're coming to tow her away next week, as a matter of fact. Take her to the dump. Pick her up in a big grab and drop her between one of those giant hydraulic presses. One crunch and it just squashes them into a sort of square metal biscuit. Then she'll go to a smelting works to be melted down just for the raw metal. Seems a shame, doesn't it? You can almost see from her eyes, those big macho racing headlights, that she knows what's in store for her. But there it is. You can see the shape she's in, and it would need hundreds of pounds to get her on the road again, even supposing there was someone nowadays who could afford to run her."
Commander Pott was looking curiously excited. "Mind if I look her over?"
"Go ahead."
The garage man shook his head sadly. She'd appreciate a last look over by someone like you who knows what real quality used to be. The whole family picked their way over and through the patches of oily ground. While Commander Pott looked under the bonnet, Mimsy and Jeremy and Jemima prodded the once beautiful soft leather upholstery. Moths flew out, and looked under the carpets front and back. Beetles scuttled about, and examined the knobs and switches and dials on the dashboard. There were dozens of them, all rusty and mildewed, and tried the big old boa constrictor horn that worked with an India rubber bulb. But nothing happened except that a lot of dust blew out of the end into Commander Pott's face as he bent over the engine, peering and tinkering. The children looked at Mimsy, and Mimsy looked back at them. And you know what? They didn't just dolefully shake their heads at each other. They all had the same look in their eyes. The look said, this must have once been the most beautiful car in the world. If the engine's more or less all right, and if we all set to and scrubbed and painted and mended and polished, do you suppose we could put her back as she used to be? It wouldn't be like having just one of those black beetles that the factories turn out in hundreds and thousands and that all look alike. We'd have a real jewel of a car, something to love and cherish and look after as if it were one of the family. Commander Pott took his face out from under the bonnet. He looked at them and they looked back at him, and he just turned to the garage man and said, I'll buy her. We all love her and we'll make her as good as new. How much do you want for her? £50, said the carriage man. She wouldn't fetch much a scrap. Commander Pott counted out the notes there and then, and said, Thank you, and will you please have her towed along to my workshop just as soon as you can? And do you know, there were almost tears of happiness in the garage man's eyes as he shook them all by the hand. As they climbed into the taxi to go off home, he said seriously, Commander Pott, Mrs. Pott, Master and Miss Pott, you'll never regret buying that car. She's going to give you the time of your lives. You've saved her from the scrap heap, and I'll eat my hat if I had hat to eat, if she doesn't repay you for what you've done today. He was still waving happily after them when they drove out the side. As they bored along in their taxi, Jemima whispered to Jeremy in the front seat next to the driver, Jeremy, did you notice something very mysterious about the old registration number that was hanging from the back of our car? There was nothing mysterious about it, said Jeremy scornfully. It was Gen 11. Yes, said Jemima excitedly. Gen 11! Don't you realise what that spells? Genie, like magical people, sort of spirits, like that story about the bottle imp by Robert Louis Stevenson that Mimsy read to us once. Said Jeremy thoughtfully. And they sat silently, thinking this odd coincidence over until they got home.